You're listening to a podcast by Way Collective, a contemplative community for love and liberation in Santa Barbara, California. This recording was the conversation starter at our Dinner and Dialogue gathering on April 30th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in. All right, friends. Well, it's great to be back in our space after we had a fun downtown Dinner and Dialogue last week. And I'm excited to keep these conversations about transformation going in the wake of Easter. So last week, we cracked open something big together. We talked about change, not as something to fear, but as the very current that carries us toward transformation. And not just any kind of transformation, but the kind that touches something deep in our being. We said, you don't get to resurrection without a letting go. You don't wake up without first being shaken, and you don't enter into deep spiritual transformation by resisting change, but by leaning into it, by trusting that the current of our lives knows where it's going, even when we don't. And tonight, I want to open the door a little bit wider to say something that I hope might feel like a relief, or maybe even like a gentle scandal, depending on where you come from. What if Christianity was never meant to be a religion in the way we've come to think of it, with rules, boxes, hierarchies, gatekeepers, and dogmas? What if it was always meant to be a wisdom tradition, a way of seeing the world, a way of being in the world, a way of becoming? Because here's the truth I keep coming back to, and maybe you felt this too. Any sacred tradition worth anything doesn't just offer wisdom for human beings, it offers wisdom for being human. And that's not about dogma, it's not about belief systems or boundary lines, it's not about who's in or who's out. It's about soul, it's about experience, it's about the mystery of becoming who we really are. And we've mentioned this idea over the past number of weeks, but some of us might have heard Richard Rohr say this before also, that Christ is not Jesus' last name, but another name for the sacred mystery in everything. And if you, like me, react when I first heard that, you might be wondering, what does that even mean? Like when Rohr says that, what is he talking about? Well, I wonder if he's inviting us into something vast, cosmic, and ancient, but also incredibly present here and now. He teaches that the Christ mystery is not limited to one person or to one event or even one moment in time. It's one name for the divine presence woven into everything from the very beginning. And this Greek word Christ comes from the Hebrew Mesach, where we get like Messiah from, meaning anointed one. So when we speak of Christ, and perhaps even when the Christian Testament writers were using it, we're really talking about the anointing within all things, the sacredness that's baked into matter itself. Another way to say that is that the world wasn't waiting for a divine touch, it was born out of it. So a spirituality that recognizes this is not about waiting for sacredness to arrive someday, but it's about waking up to the sacredness that's already here and that has always been here. We are still in the flow, Rohr says, still part of this evolving mystery that holds everything together. And so for him, Christ is like a blueprint for this pattern that runs through all of reality. And what we come to see is a universal rhythm, self-emptying and infilling, death and resurrection, letting go and becoming more. And this is not just spirituality, it's actually the very shape of reality, the deep pattern behind everything that grows. And here's the really good news. This doesn't just belong to Christians. This isn't an exclusive club or a divine patent. This is the truth that includes everybody in all religions and all faiths and all paths, or people of no faith at all. So many of us who grew up in Christianity were told that the problem was overcoming our sinful separation from God. But as Rohr says, we've actually always been included. The problem was never separation, it was just our awareness of our intrinsic union. So, what if we stopped striving to get God or to get to God and started waking up to the God who's already here, the sacredness already anointing our lives and our bodies in this very moment? Christ, not as a person, but as a presence, not just a figure in history, but a force in reality. A mystery running through all things, seeds cracking open, oceans breathing tides, your breath right now, your heartbreaks, your breakthroughs. You know, there's another theologian I love who puts it this way: Christ is the name for the force of creative transformation in the universe. The pulse of life always becoming more. The unfolding that won't stop unfolding. The process we're not meant to control, but to surrender to. Which means, again, your life is not separate from the sacred. Our process of realizing this is not a detour from our spirituality. It is our spirituality. We don't have to transcend our humanity to find the holy. We just have to say yes to inhabiting our lives more fully. So what does that look like in practice, I think it can look like this. Pretend with me that you're in a season of grief and something in your life has ended. A relationship, a role, a dream, and everything in you wants to run or to numb and to shut it down. But instead you stay, you listen, you allow the ache to speak to you. And slowly something shifts, not all at once, but gradually. New compassion grows, new priorities rise to the surface. Something in you both softens and strengthens at the same time. That's Christ as creative transformation, not a miracle beamed down from somewhere else, but a resurrection born right in the middle of your pain. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's real and it's deep. So many of us may have grown up thinking Christianity was about escaping this world and maybe even about being good enough to get out of here. But what if it's actually the opposite? What if it's about falling deeper into the world, into presence, into participation, into the kind of transformation that doesn't rescue us from our lives, but reveals the sacred already within them? And that's what we're here to explore tonight, not as a lecture, hopefully, but as a conversation. To ask together, what does it mean to see the Christ, not as a doctrine, but as a name for the divine aliveness within you and in me and this moment right here? What does it mean to see Christianity not as a rigid belief system, but as a living, breathing stream of wisdom about what it means to love, to lose, and to begin again? And maybe you've wondered, can those old symbols or those ancient stories really mean anything to my life today? Well, I think they can, but only when we stop worshiping the symbols themselves and start living what they're pointing to. Like we talked about resurrection at Easter, not as a one-time miracle, but as a pattern woven into life itself. When something unexpected grows in the place of loss, when hope dares to return to the ashes, we are living the resurrection story, not by believing in it, but by becoming it. Or take the command to love, not as a self-sacrifice that erases you, but as a sacred practice of self-giving that stays rooted. So when we show up with compassion, but with boundaries that honor our own humanity too, when our love includes both us and others, we are embodying a Christ-like love. Not codependence, not burnout, but the kind of love that heals rather than depletes. And friends, here's something that I hope might set a few of you free. You have permission to use these stories, these symbols, and these traditions in whatever way brings you life. You are allowed to draw from them like deep wells of wisdom, and also to move beyond them if the mystery is calling you forward into something wider. Because, as Rohr said, Christ is just one name for the mystery in everything. It's not the only name. It's not the final word. Think of it this way. It's just one beautiful window into the vastness of divine presence. And if that window has meaning for you, look through it with awe. And if another window opens, don't be afraid to follow the light. Maybe some of us are wondering, what does all of this mean for me? It means that the story of Christ as creative transformation is not just about the cosmos evolving or some ancient symbols unfolding their meaning across history. It's also about your life. It's a story that each of us are invited to live into. It's you becoming more fully yourself. It's you shedding what no longer fits, grieving what is gone, welcoming what's next, even when you don't fully understand it. This is Christ as the pattern in your own becoming. The movement from wound to wisdom, from resistance to openness, and from fear to freedom. So, every time we soften instead of shutting down, every time we forgive or risk vulnerability, or choose presence over performance, we are embodying the Christ mystery. We're not just changing, we're actually being transformed by the very pattern that animates the universe. And none of us are alone in that journey. We're part of a lineage of becoming, a communion of people learning how to surrender to the flow of love, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. This life is a sacred unfolding, and it's happening in each of us, whether we ask it to or not. All we can do is learn to be present and open in the process. And I want to offer one final thought for those of us who live between worlds, who code switch between language that sounds religious and language that sounds secular, who speak of God in one setting and energy or spirit in another, who sometimes say Christ and sometimes say love or presence or the universe. I wonder if you'd be open to thinking about it this way. If you do that kind of code switching, you are not confused. You are actually multilingual in the language of the soul. And there's no one right way to name the mystery. There's only the invitation to live into it, to embody it, to keep pointing toward it, whatever words you use. So the goal isn't being more religious. The goal is to be real. And so whether you find yourself in settings with old friends who use the old language or new friends who use new language, remember that to speak of Christ or to speak of love are both the same thing. They're synonyms. So if you go back to using the old language in certain settings, and you can speak with new language that is more meaningful to you, you're not actually going backwards, you're going deeper. And that's the adventure. All right, I'm looking forward to talking about this with you tonight. Thanks for listening to this podcast by Way Collective. To keep up with our community, you can subscribe to this podcast, go to www.waycollective.org, or follow us on Instagram at @waycollective. Peace and every good, y'all.